All right, we are back once again. Ben Raza, Matt Kajeski here for Awesemo.com, and we've got another college football slate, Thursday edition. 7 games. Rutgers has been canceled. We will get to that. Plenty to dive into on the DFS side, the betting side, and everything in between. Matt, we got things started with week 0, a little warm-up 5-game slate. Now we dive into a pretty nice 7-game slate here.
Yeah, man, I am excited for these games. We have some good rivalries. I'm particularly excited for the Ohio State game, but we're finally dealing with some teams that are ranked, some good games here.
Yeah, we got Southern Utah on the slate once again. Our boys, we're going to talk about them. Yeah, 45-point underdog, no big deal. But before we do that, I want to give a shout out to our friends at Prize Picks. They're offering daily prop-based fantasy contests and features the largest group of college football-based contests in the DFS industry. They have a special, literally a no-brainer promo right now for the Georgia-Clemson game on Saturday. All you have to do, you use the code AWESEMO-CFB, place any entry on Georgia versus Clemson, and if 1 point is scored, which obviously is going to happen, you get $50. So that is a no-brainer. You want to go over there and take advantage. I know you did a video this morning on Prize Picks. Do you have one right now, though, that kind of has caught your eye with just an hour before lock that you can expand on?
Yeah, I'll reiterate one I talked about this morning. It's Joe Milton, Tennessee quarterback. You couldn't go for as drastically of a change that he's going through. Playing in the run-heavy, inept Michigan offense, he's going to a Josh Heupel offense. They were number 1 in plays per game when he was with UCF last year. I don't know if Tennessee will be that efficient. I don't think they can put up number 1 plays per game, but they'll certainly be one of the more pass-heavy and faster teams. They're playing Bowling Green, so as long as he doesn't get benched, he would get benched because they get up by too many points, but assuming he plays at least a half in this game, he should be good for that.
I like it. Yeah, we get Tennessee on the side. A lot of fun teams to talk about, but the game, listen, I don't make the schedule. The first game we're going to dive into in chat, it's good to see a lot of the regulars in here. What's up, everybody? Let's hit the like button as we dive in. We've got Boise State, 6-point road dogs heading into the bounce house. It's up to almost 6.5. I see 7 somewhere to take on UCF. Highest total, 68. So points are going to be scored. This is a game we obviously need to dive into. 2 pretty quality teams, Matt. Boise State, of course, known for the blue turf. They won't be playing on that tonight, but they've got a lot. They've got stability at QB. They've got some good weapons on the outside. I like the team. We'll dive into the defense in a little bit, but talk to me about Boise State and this offense.
So Hank Bachmeier is the returning signal caller. He was hurt last year. He's somewhat affordable. The issue is he's not mobile whatsoever, and we have a lot of really good signal callers on this slate. So if Hank Bachmeier gets it done, it has to be through multiple aerial touchdowns, which is possible, but it's a team undergoing a slight transition in offense. They changed offensive coordinators. Andy Avalos comes over as head coach. The new offensive coordinator comes over from UC Davis. So if you don't know a lot about UC Davis, they're a team that actually ran fairly up-tempo, but they were really run-heavy. So I do think Hank Bachmeier is going to have to get there with efficiency if he does. Luckily, he is Khalil Shakir back, a dude that had a 38% target share last year, so he just projects insanely well in this high total game. But then Boise State was pretty funky with their depth chart, and I don't know if it's new coaching staff or a little bit of gamesmanship here, but they listed C.T. Thomas, who we projected as a starter for multiple seasons now, as a backup. He was listed as a co-starter to Stephen Cobbs behind him. Cobbs is basically like their return specialist when Shakir is not returning. So it was interesting to see that. And then they listed Octavius Evans over Billy Bowens as the other starter. I think that makes a little more sense. Evans is a guy that's battled a lot of injuries. Bowens has just been a part-time player in his career with Boise. But Shakir is the one guy I think you would probably want to stack with Bachmeier no matter what. And if you're stacking the Boise side of this offense, you could look to a Cobbs or an Octavius Evans, maybe a C.T. Thomas if you're getting contrarian.
Do you have any interest in Holani in the backfield, or is there anyone else in the backfield that for some reason strikes your interest?
Yeah, I like Holani a lot, and it's because Andrew Van Buren was so bad. Van Buren was like one of the least efficient rushers I've ever seen behind this offense. He averaged 3.4 yards per carry. Holani was really good when he wasn't injured, so we have to go back to 2019. Over 1,000 rushing yards, pretty good pass catcher too. They do have Cyrus Habibi-Lokoyo, who was an Oregon player last year and frustratingly vultured a lot of touchdowns on the goal line. He's like a big bruiser. Habibi-Lokoyo was listed over Van Buren on the depth chart. So I think at the very least, he does play that sort of goal line role. but obviously he followed Avalos over to this program. I think he'll have a role in some capacity or another, but Helani's the guy I prefer, and he's affordable on both platforms.
Yeah, as you mentioned, reasonable price, sub 6K on DraftKings, sub 8K over on FanDuel. I don't mind that play. That really kind of sums up. Is there any, to me, that's the offense. You mentioned big time receiver, stability at quarterback. They've got a running back. I don't see a lot of peripherals for Boise, do you?
No, not really. I don't think there's too much to mention on defense. They're pretty middling there. I don't see them really being able to stop what UCF has to offer.
So that's what I want to get to right now. I did put a couple of bets out this morning, and I'll tell people watching, UCF was one of them. I laid the points here, and it's because Boise State lost 2 all Mountain West corners in this game, and I think they're going to struggle in the secondary. With Dylan Gabriel under center for UCF, he's got a lot of weapons around him. We could spend a whole show ripping Gus Malzahn, but we'll see what he's made of. He's got every opportunity. So talk about UCF. Obviously, they scored over 40 points a game last year. I expect more of the same. Do you?
Yeah, a lot of that was on volume with Heupel we mentioned when we talked about Milton. And now they're not going to have that. They're going to be, I would guess, middling in plays per game. They're probably going to drop in efficiency just with Malzahn coming over. But it's still one of the best quarterbacks in the country, guy that probably gets drafted and the best quarterback in this conference. He doesn't have a ton of dual threat ability, which is concerning because he is really expensive. And then how do you project him with the play volume potentially going to decrease here? I still think he's probably the safest option among the best signal callers here because he's the only one in a competitive game. Sort of low risk contests, things like that, cash games. You probably want to play Dylan Gabriel because he's the only one that has security today. But in GPPs, I'm fine getting away from him because of the drastic change in the offense.
If you are going to play him, and yeah, he's expected as obviously getting some ownership, particularly when you can play 2 QBs. I assume Jalen Robinson going to be a guy you want to pair with him. Who else, if anyone, in terms of the skill position players?
Yeah, Jalen Robinson's the kind of in-house leader after they lost Marlon Williams and Trey Nixon this offseason. They also lost Jacob Harris. So a lot of production's leaving this offense. Robinson's a dude that caught 55 balls, nearly 1,000 yards with everybody in place. The next guy I want to mention is Ryan O'Keefe, who is probably going to move into the slot. He's a little speedy guy, so they're going to use him downfield. He's really, really cheap on FanDuel, like egregiously cheap on FanDuel. He's appropriately priced on DraftKings, but I see him as one of the better values over there. The other starter was listed as it's going to be a timeshare between Brandon Johnson, Jordan Johnson. Nate Craig Myers enters his 6th year of college football, and he's never produced more than 23 catches. So I wouldn't anticipate too much Nate Craig Myers, but he does have familiarity with Malzahn and Auburn, who initially recruited him. I'm probably sticking to Jalen Robinson and Ryan O'Keefe.
So just the top two for
yeah, unless you're playing huge GPPs and you want to take a shot on a guy like Brandon Johnson, it's probably something that you're just going to have to like throw a dart and hit, but it's not likely.
Last thing, former Northwestern great, I believe, Isaiah Bowser in this backfield. What is up with is it going to be more running back by committee? We've seen that in the past with them, or is this his job? And do you think that's an effective way to maybe leverage against the Gabriel stack if you want to take the running situation?
I do like him as leverage against the Gabriel stack. It's tough though. Like Gus Malzahn has never shown the ability to evaluate his players. Even like last year, not giving Tank Bigsby a full workload. I don't anticipate them giving Bowser like a 3-down role. I think he probably leads this team in running back touches today, but how many actually is that? Johnny Richardson's another guy who probably is going to touch the ball today. They listed Mark Anthony Richards 3rd on the depth chart. He was a guy that's familiar with Malzahn, came over from Auburn. I think it's Bowser. This is going to be a pretty uncertain situation. I have a little bit of him in tournaments, but it's not something I'm looking to take a big stand on.
It's obviously, like I said, a very good game, good stackability on both sides. I lean UCF in the betting market. I don't believe you've bet this game, correct?
I will not bet this game.
Okay. Well, then it'll just be me on the Gus Malzahn island.
I think Boise got an upgrade in coaching from losing. It's funny now the Auburn head coach, and I think UCF took a major step back in coaching. So what do we think of the changes here? I could see Boise potentially pulling an upset.
Oh, that hurts. No, they're not. They're going to get torched through the air. Just go smiles down. Don't do it to me. Anyway, let's
I
see
mean,
how that turns
he
out.
at least he can't make the bad decision and play Bo Nix.
That's true. If he does that, then we got a whole nother set of problems to deal with. He's got a quarterback. He'll be sticking with him. I do feel good about that. The next game on the schedule is a weird one to me. You've got East Carolina, 9-point dog going into App State. Totals pedestrian 56. East Carolina is a team, honestly, I feel like most people don't really care about them, rightfully so, but they have a player at quarterback, Holton Ahlers, who is super dynamic, but you have to talk to me about what happened to him last year. He was virtually non-existent in the running game. Is that a coaching situation, or do we see him this year revert back to where he's a legit 100-yard bonus type guy?
That was really interesting to me too. I played him a ton early in the year, and it's not a coaching change. Mike Houston is still their head coach. Their coaching staff is intact year over year. Even from the year where you saw Ahlers as a freshman rushing like crazy, he's just changed a little bit as a player. And I'm not sure why. It kind of reminds me, if you want to compare him to another player, he kind of reminds me of like a Chevon Cordero, but they try to use him as a pure passer and it just clearly did not work. Like this team essentially tanked and bottomed out. I think they need to get back to what they did 2 years ago with Ahlers, where he's running the ball more. They were a team that's always been fairly up tempo. So the volume's there. If he can discover some sort of efficiency, he's a good GPP play for that reason. Also, we have locked in targets we know are going to get the ball, and CJ Johnson and Tyler Snead, both pretty middling in price. So this sets up as a pretty good GPP target for me. People won't be on them because the total's lower. It's purely a GPP play. They're not guys I would consider in cash, but the stackability of this game is there.
Yeah, like I said, this is of the 14 teams. I don't think East Carolina is going to get a ton of love in the ownership game. They are on the road. They're underdogs. It's not a high total. In the backfield, you got Rajay Harris. Anything there, 6,600, or is that just kind of an indifferent play to you?
Yeah, he's going to split with Keaton Mitchell, and Mitchell's more the third down back. So you have a guy in Rajay Harris who's more expensive. He's not going to catch a lot of passes, and it really makes him dependent on the touchdown. Whereas Keaton Mitchell takes all like the high value touches, but he won't get as much on the ground. So they cannibalize each other enough to the point where I'm not targeting them in this game with a 24.5 total.
On the other
on their
side,
that is.
Yeah. I mean, this is just, I'm interested to see App State tonight a little bit. They've had so much, it feels like Zach Thomas was there since they took over. I mean, it's been a guy that provided so much stability under center. He, of course, graduates. And now they bring in Chase Bryce off a failed experiment at Duke. Clemson, we've seen him a little bit. I know he's your favorite guy to talk about. So we could talk about him. I don't think he's going to be really relevant to this slate. Correct me if I'm wrong. They're more a ground and pound type team. Cameron Peoples, one of the premier backs on the slate. Talk to me about Appalachian State and what you see them kind of doing here.
Yeah, Chase Bryce, he continues to make good decisions for playing time. He just can't make good decisions on the field.
Yeah, that's Bryce. A slight problem.
I mean, he goes from Clemson, loses the job, goes to Duke, doesn't play well enough to retain their job. So he goes down to G5 competition at App State. Kind of the opposite of what Hendon Hooker did, who is not going to start this year. Unfortunately for him, he made a poor choice going to Tennessee. But Chase Bryce, he's supposed to be a dual threat, but he's so unaware in the pocket that he just takes so many sacks that it basically mitigates all his rushing upside. Like, he had 91 rushing attempts last year that includes sacks, and he finished with 93 yards. That's how many sacks this dude takes. That's not going to matter as much against East Carolina in this game. App State, no matter what, they change coaches every couple of years. They're in their third coach. I'll consider offensive coordinators in this as well in their last 4 seasons, and they've continued to run the same offense. They hire at least most of the time within the program. The guy they bring in, Frank Ponce, he did take a little bit of time away from App State, but he has ties to this program. So I think the offense is going to look a lot like it has in the past. Really run heavy, power run style ball, which puts me more on the runners than Chase Bryce and the receivers.
And so is this People's backfield solely, is someone like Nate Knoll in conversations as kind of a guy who's going to garner some share of these carries? How do you see that being divvied up? Because, if you look at the spread and you look at the line, it kind of seems that App State is going to be running late in this game to kind of salt it away.
Yeah, App State's going to use 2 backs at the very least. Peoples is the favorite, and he will lead the backfield in touches. Noel will come in and be more of a change of pace, 1B to people's 1A type rusher, but that has a lot of value in this offense as we've seen in the past. There's a chance that this team gets like up to 35 or so rushing attempts, maybe a little more, maybe pushing 40, which means they could both have value. And I think you could even see a back of the roster guy like Jameer Smith, a former Notre Dame transfer, get a couple carries here as well if they actually beat App State by the 10 points they're supposed to be beating them by.
Yeah, Harrington obviously not here. He will fit into there once they start probably, later in the year. But People seems like a good target if you're going to go to this game. Anything on the outside, Hennigan is probably your best bet. But as you mentioned, not a prolific passing attack.
So they're adding back Corey Sutton to the offense. He's a former starter, a really, I would say, productive receiver with this offense, but he missed last year. And they listed him as a co-starter with Jalen Virgil, as they did Thomas Hennigan. The only clear-cut starter they listed on the depth chart was Malik Williams. I wouldn't put too much into that. I think the pecking order is either Hennigan or Sutton. They're pretty clearly the 1-2. I don't know which one's going to be above the other. Malik Williams third, Jalen Virgil fourth. But again, low-volume passing attack. None of them really project that well in like the mid-4s to 5K range. There's some better options we'll talk about later in the slate right around that price.
Favorite play from this game? Is it just Peoples?
Peoples would be 1. Noel would be 2. Third would be looking probably to the other side in a contrarian like Holden Ayler stack.
Okay, fair enough. I have no interest in the betting market for this game. No chance I touch it just for that. I assume you feel the same way.
It's not one I'm going to bet.
No. The next game, USF every year is just getting worse and worse. They used to be a respectable team. I was a little surprised to see them plus 19.5. And then the more I dug in, it felt like maybe that's not even enough. They go to NC State, total of 58. I don't know. It's tough times for USF these days. They don't have a lot going on. It's a team that, of course, is expected to struggle. First question I ask when we have these teams that really look like they could have some issues: what is the status of the QB situation? Are they playable? Is it one guy's job, or are we looking at a platoon?
For USF, they are moving forward with Cade Fortin, who is, a guy that threw 8 passes last year, but he's played at times in his career. You have to go back to 2019 to find it. He's a dual threat, so that's at least productive. And this USF offense has like the shell of a productive system you'd like to target a quarterback in. They're really fast. They're really pass heavy, some of that out of necessity, but Charlie Weiss Jr. is their offensive coordinator. That suggests they're going to be up-tempo and pass heavy again this year. It's just they haven't had any semblance of an efficient passer. I think Fortin is fine based on price, but ultimately I'm not going to get to any USF because the total is so low. There are players in this price range at quarterback that are a little more attractive. And then this team didn't release a depth chart. So they literally have 6 receivers that could start and lead this team in receiving. And I don't have any confidence in which one it's going to be. So if you're trying to stack, you're just throwing darts, which is not a situation I want to target.
Yeah, 7-game slate. We talked last week on the night slate. There was only 2 games and you're funneled into certain weird things and uncomfortable spots. Here you have a little more selection with what you can do. So USF not releasing a depth chart, that's bold. Do you feel the same way in terms of the backfield? You've got Battie, you've got Joyner. Is that a true timeshare, or do we just not know?
I think in that backfield, it's going to be a combination of Joyner and Beatty, but I think it's going to be split. Beatty was more efficient. Joyner is a guy I think they could use more as a pass catcher. But someone's going to have to fill the void left by Johnny Ford. I just don't think in this game where they're nearly 3 touchdown underdogs that the running back has much of a factor in the game overall.
Yeah, it just seems like a team, more questions than answers, and you're not getting a ton of upside by taking the unknown. Like we said, almost a 3 touchdown dog to this NC State squad who, I don't know, I could see this, we at Betting You, our podcast, which you can catch every week over on our podcast feed, Spotify, Apple, wherever you listen. You talked about during the ACC preview that NC State was one of those teams that maybe they could make a leap with Devin Leary at QB, Zonovan Knight. They've got some pieces. What do you make of this team in this spot? Obviously, USF is struggling. Knight looks like a pretty appealing price tag for a mid-range running back. Do you see that, or is there another spot to target?
I like him. He's going to be in a timeshare no matter what with Ricky Person. Their coach just apparently doesn't look at analytics and can't figure out that Knight is the more efficient rusher, better pass catcher too. But in this situation where you have him as a 3-touchdown favorite, these are the kind of situations I like to target in DFS, where you can jam in some expensive stacks and take some middling price runners that have a lot of upside. Knight has a ton of upside, not only because he's the more efficient back, but touchdowns in a game where NC State projects to score a lot of them. That's a situation I'm willing to bet on. Even Ricky Person, I think, is viable for that reason too. We don't like him as a player. He's just far less efficient. For example, he averaged 4.4 yards per carry to Donovan Knight's 5.5. Donovan Knight outrushed him on fewer carries, but Person's going to see half the work. So he's viable for that reason.
And with the game, this is a pretty big spread. Are you a little concerned about trying to stack up like NC State in terms of the QB with a couple of these pass catchers just because you need USF to kind of cooperate? Or is that something in a large field tournament that you think could be worth it if you want to be aggressive?
I think it's worth it if you want to be aggressive, attacking the high total. A 39-point implied team total is fine to target. The problem is Leary's not mobile whatsoever. So it's partly why he got hurt last year. He can't avoid any pressure. But Leary, their pass rate's high enough at 50%. It's almost right at the dot on 50%. If he just takes over most of the scores in this game, he's somebody that could win a tournament. I think it's going to be hard to outscore guys like Dylan Gabriel and some of the other signal callers we haven't gotten to yet, but Leary for GPPs makes sense with the high total overall.
Fair enough. Another game, you're going to be hearing this a lot. I'm not going to bet this. I have no idea what to expect from USF. They could be god-awful. Maybe they're competent. That's a pass for me. Not going to lay the points, not going to take the points. So we move on. But before we do, I want to mention, as you guys know, last week, all of this data that Matt does, the player props, the usage, the depth charts, the projections, the ownership that we now have was free. But now we have launched the actual college football DFS package. But we're giving a promo for this first week. The promo code is TAILGATE, and you get $10 off your first week of Awesemo Plus college football, which includes everything I was just talking about, the player projections, the ownership projections, matchup data, all the things that we're referencing on this show. You can activate the promo by clicking the link in the description of this video. Obviously, it's on our website. You can get it anywhere, but there's no better time to do this. It's going to be a great year. Betting, DFS, everything in between. We just love that the college football product is going. It's my favorite sport. It's Matt's favorite sport. And chat, you guys seem very excited to talk about Bowling Green, baby. Our boys are on the slate. This might be the only time we get to talk about them. Maybe we'll get some action during the year. Yikes. All right. So this is an interesting situation that we're going to have to get into a little bit. They are a 37-point underdog going into Tennessee. That's bad, obviously. Total of 61. So my first question is, when we have something like this, do we just simply omit Bowling Green from the slate? That's my first question.
Yeah, we do.
Okay. That's unfortunate because they're a cool team, but I see what you're doing there. My next question is then, does that make stacking Tennessee basically unplayable because they have no situation where the game stays close?
Stacking Tennessee is viable. Their team total is massive, 47 points and rising, depending on where you can get this number. Their team that could easily get there just based on raw volume. And it's not just their implied team total so high. They're now moving forward with Josh Heupel as their play caller. The fastest offense in the entire NCAA. Very balanced. They're about 50-50 pass to run. So you can use quarterbacks, receivers, and rushers from this team. It's all about how you want to structure Tennessee. And there is one question. Do they keep this close enough, Bowling Green that is, where you can get enough run out of these starters? Or are we dealing with a Clemson situation where we don't get any second half run? These are legit questions you have to ask.
Yeah, there's no doubt. We talk about this throughout the season a little bit when we get into this. The other question, I'm not going to get conspiracy theory. I'm not going to get too crazy, but do you think Milton is firmly entrenched, or could this be an audition where they want to see Hendon Hooker, the Virginia Tech transfer, in there as well, kind of in mop-up duty, just to see what he can kind of do?
If the game gets out of hand, which I expect it to, I think we see them both tonight.
So does that kill possibly going to Milton?
I don't think so, because they're implied team total at 47 points. They're projected for nearly 4 scores at halftime, just under 4 scores. If Milton takes all 4 of those, he could still enter the GPP conversation tonight for sure. And if Bowling Green can keep it somewhat close, then Milton could be, a player that you see throughout more of the game as well.
I hope they keep it close. There's no offense to anyone that roots for Tennessee. I have no reason that I don't like them, but I just find it hilarious when they don't play well. And Rocky Top is in shambles, but I'm sure they're going to roll tonight. Obviously, they'll be gearing down and running the football. Do you just expect a multitude of backs, or is there one guy in the backfield that maybe could steal those 4 or 5 first half touchdowns?
I think they'll split between Jabari Small and Tyon Evans. Small is an incumbent player from this team. He only rushed 27 times for 117 yards last year, but he did play. And then Tyon Evans is a JUCO back. He's a 4-star recruit, and he was the number 1 junior college back in this year's class. So he's a guy that Tennessee is pretty high on. I prefer Tyon Evans based on his profile. Jabari Small was pretty inefficient, not a high-profile recruit whatsoever in his class, but it's really small. And both these guys are unproven, so I think they do get extended running the game. If they get up by like 4 scores or something, anticipate some of the backups coming in, but you should see a lot of Tyon Evans and a lot of Jabari Small.
Do you have any interest? We talked about this with UCLA and Hawaii. In pairing them, you would pay basically $11K and you would consolidate all of the rushing. Is that something that you think you could do and maybe you get 5 or 6 scores on the ground?
Yeah, I think on this slate, you can do it. I'm not sure if it's the right approach because we have some other really cheap backs. On the previous slate, the only cheap back we really had was Sevian Morrison, and he didn't see the field whatsoever. So I think with some of the cheaper backs available today, you don't necessarily need to play them both in the same lineup. But I think it's viable based on the high team total. Just make sure you're not stacking Joe Milton in that lineup.
Definitely not. Yeah. And it is a lot different. There was only 3 games, as you mentioned. This is a 7-game slate. There's just more guys in the pool. It makes it probably less optimal to do that. I assume, unless you know something that I don't, that you didn't lay the 37 or take the 37 in the betting market.
I did not.
No. We really should, just for solidarity, take Bowling Green, but we're not going to do that because we like money. All right. The game, I think this is the best game on the slate, not maybe for DFS, but for life. You've got Ohio State, 14-point favorite going into Minnesota, healthy total of 62. So there's a lot to get here. Ohio State is a team, unlike most on the slate. They've got bigger and better things. They've got national title aspirations, and it's going to start with CJ Stroud. We haven't seen him. Nobody knows. I assume he's pretty good if he beat out the guys that he beat out. Man, he's got everything that you could ask for, though. He's got 2 pro receivers, a bunch of guys in the backfield. Talk to me about Ohio State and what you expect from this offense.
I think they'll continue to move the ball, and I don't think it depends on Stroud. If he is the signal caller everyone thinks he is, that's great, but they can always fall back on their run game. Now, they're a team that returns some pretty solid production on the offensive line. They are losing a pair of players on the offensive line, but the players they're returning are some of the best offensive linemen in the country. Like Thayer Munford's probably going to be a first-round pick. So if Stroud, worst case scenario, is just a complete bust, not what they thought he was, I think they can always fall back on the run game over Minnesota. Minnesota's run defense ranked 124th out of 127 in the country. They're returning 10 starters on defense. And this is a situation where a lot of people bring up the returning production. Every team in college football returns 10 starters on defense. These starters on Minnesota's defense were all horrific. This is a situation where you can capitalize on this with not only Master Teague, who's a veteran, but the number 1 running back recruit in the country, a 5-star recruit, Travian Henderson, another player in Mayan Williams, who's played really well in camp, according to beat writers. Unfortunately, it's going to be 3 guys doing the ball, but I think Ohio State can get it done even if Stroud performs poorly. And it's really hard to imagine Stroud performing poorly considering he's throwing to Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson, potentially both day 1, day 2 picks in the NFL draft. So I think even with, the run game they have, the advantages they have, Stroud still should perform well. I like him in GPPs for that reason.
Do you anticipate that he could be mobile at all?
He wasn't recruited as a mobile signal caller, but you never know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Go ahead.
Even if he had Brock Purdy's mobility, that would be a huge plus.
That's because Brock Purdy is an absolute goat.
Or how about like Ian Book? Like they're mostly
Notre Dame.
scrambles. They're not guys like you design a lot of runs for. If he had that mobility, it'd be great. Or like a Sam Howell.
Yeah, more than reasonable. The other thing, as we've pointed to, and you've always mentioned, they're going to keep him upright. So even if he has a couple timely scrambles, they're going to count. It's not like they're going to get negated by a ton of sacks, most likely. I really don't see Minnesota's front, which, 6.3 yards per rushing attempt allowed. That's just disgraceful. That's down there with UMass and the other dysfunctional teams. So we're going to see these guys run wild. It's just more of a pick your poison, though. Like, do you have a lean with these two absolute monster receivers, or is it just kind of a coin flip? Do you think it's too expensive to consolidate that much with Stroud and both of them?
No, you can definitely stack them both on DraftKings for sure. Because of a signal caller we haven't talked about yet. FanDuel, the pricing is actually pretty soft there. You can stack them both too. You're probably playing Ryan O'Keefe in that lineup, but there's so many affordable options on this slate. You can play whoever you want. You just play, if you want to stack Stroud, Olave, and Garrett Wilson in your lineup, you just play, even on FanDuel, you play like Nate Noel, and then you take some other cheap back like an Tyon Evans or something from Tennessee. There's certainly ways to get them both in the lineup and actually still feel pretty good about it.
Resident expert and friend of the show, Ohio State Trami, hot take, McCord will be the starter by week 3. I really hope not, because that probably is bad. We're both on Ohio State tonight, as is the public, I believe, but I really think they're going to roll them. I don't think Minnesota's any good. And that starts with Tanner Morgan, who at times has looked good, but he's been throwing to Rashad Bateman and Tyler Johnson. I have it on good authority. Neither of them will be there tonight. They're going to try to
Neither will Chris Ottman-Bell.
That's right. So they're really potentially thin with some super dynamic playmakers. They do have a monster running back. I will give him credit. And this offensive line is very good. But the question I have to ask you is, do you think they can have success just handing the ball off to Ibrahim and trying to just run the ball down Ohio State's throat?
I don't think they will have success doing that. Not only because they're at a severe disadvantage doing that. Like, Ohio State's defense lost a lot of production, but all of it came at linebacker. They've lost so many linebackers. Their front is intact. Their defensive backs are intact. That is not good for a Minnesota team that is really reliant on running the ball. And then when they get themselves in deficits and they're in clear pass situations, having 7 of the top defensive backs returning for Ohio State is a recipe for disaster for this team. Not to mention, Ibrahim was horribly inefficient with his carries last year. Anyway, the reason he got there is because he averaged 30.1 opportunities per game. That is not a joke. He averaged 30 touches per game last year. Just downright crazy volume. So there are paths to Ibrahim just straight voluming his way into like 100-yard bonus tonight. And with the cheap options on the slate, I think you have to play some Ibrahim in tournaments. Like pairing him with, on the cheaper end, a Nate Noel or a Tyon Evans could make sense for your running back pairing. And he's a decent run back in Ohio State stacks. He's the only one with clear volume on the team.
What do you make of the receivers? Say we're right, and Travian Henderson and Williams and Master T, they're just gutting them, and Minnesota has to abandon what they want to do. Tanner Morgan's dropping back. Who's going to be there on the outside? Anybody that could potentially get into our lineups?
They're cheap receivers. I mean, Daniel Jackson and Dylan Wright are the top 2. I don't think you see a bunch of efficiency from this offense, and that's reflected in the implied team total. And now you have, like, Chris Ottman-Bell had a 22% target share last year. That's gone. It was only 5.4 targets per game, which just speaks to how much they're truly running the ball. But like, Daniel Jackson is probably the favorite here. He only caught 12 passes last year. And then Dylan Wright from Texas A&M's never recorded a stat in his career. So you're dealing with just completely unknown options.
Like I said, my favorite bet on the slate. I think it's yours as well.
This is my favorite bet. It's my favorite bet of the whole weekend.
Yeah, I don't get it. I got it at 13.5. I feel comfortable at 14.5. I'd probably try to, I don't know. I hate to say buy a half a point, but that's just a weird hook.
Sorry, not to interrupt you, but I think if you want better odds, you and I talked about this on our Betting You podcast. Look at some alternate odds. If you could get like a really good number at like minus 19 Ohio State, like plus 160 or something, I would consider taking that. Anything below 3 scores.
Yeah, there are 20, I'm looking right now at a couple There's some 20.5s, which is obviously a very good number, plus 155. I see. I'm comfortable with that.
Yeah, I think that's about the range where I would go to.
Yeah, I mean, this is a situation they really, really could gut them. I don't think Minnesota's made that big of a stride defensively. So we're gonna see. It's gonna be a fascinating game. The public is all on Ohio State, but that doesn't mean, like I said, sometimes people just know. And we're gonna see. If it's a giant trap tomorrow night, I probably just won't mention it on the show and hope that none of you guys remember that. We're gonna remember all the good things that we said and not that. All right, let's keep it going. We got a couple more, and then chat. We will try to get into some questions. I know you guys want access to Matt, and we will get some toss-ups for you before we get out of here, particularly if we pump those likes over 100. That should be no problem, though. We have a lot of people in here, and that is very, very exciting. We get some FCS versus FBS, which normally is fun, except the spreads are like 60 points. Not here. Eastern Washington is the favorite. They have taken a ton of money since this game opened. They are playing UNLV. My first question, is this a product of Eastern Washington just being a very, very good team, or UNLV just being that bad?
UNLV is that bad.
Okay.
They were 0-6 last year. None of their games were particularly close. They're returning most of their starters, and this is a Minnesota situation where that's not a good thing. This is a DraftKings only game, but it's one that is basically going to decide the whole slate, because you're going to have just crazy ownership on Eastern Washington. DraftKings priced them as if they were like 30-point underdogs. So Eric Barriere, their quarterback, really efficient passer at the FCS level, 62% completion percentage, a dual threat as well, had 144 rushing yards last year. They only played 7 games, so you extrapolate that out a little bit. He's probably like a 300-yard rusher in a full season. He's going to be set up just for awesome production here. This Eastern Washington offense is like UCF level. They run super fast, 85 plays per game, and their pass rate is really high, 60%. Even maybe like a Mike Leach offense would be a better comparison than like UCF, maybe because UCF is balanced. This Eastern Washington team favors the pass. Their quarterback is mobile. And I think the best receiver play on this slate is Talalu Laimu Jones at 5K flat. And if it's not him, second's probably Andrew Boston at 4,300. So you just get immediately one of the cheap stacks that lets you jam in all the expensive receivers like on the Ohio State side.
So assuming you're very comfortable allocating basically 15K for Barriere and those two receivers together.
Yeah, I think in cash lineups, you need to play Barriere in one of these receivers, if not two.
What do you anticipate? Because, I mean, listen, UNLV was dysfunctional across the board. Their rushing yards allowed were even, I mean, that was bad. In a series of bad stats, that stood out even worse. Do you expect, or is there any chance, you mentioned how high octane this offense is and they want to throw the ball. Is there anything in the backfield that we should be aware of with Eastern Washington where maybe they just run it?
They're going to use a 3-man committee. Dennis Merritt, Tamarick Pierce are 2 players that are probably going to receive carries. And interestingly, they listed another back on their depth chart over Pierce. The name is escaping me at the moment. I didn't initially have him projected, and I had to switch that. His name is, let's see, Micah Smith. So I think you probably see all 3 of them out there, but a 3-way timeshare is not ideal. I think you just go with the cheaper options in the receivers because they're so secure. Instead of having 3 guys battling for production, you could look to just one of these receivers.
So the interesting thing about this game, though, Eastern Washington, you make a great case. Clearly, they're priced like they're Southern Utah, and they're not. But in a healthy total, it's still a toss-up game. So does that mean that UNLV is playable on the slate? I assume that they're going to cooperate and put up some points. It's not like Eastern Washington is a massive favorite by any stretch.
I think they will. One last thing on the receivers. I saw a question in the chat asking about Freddie Roberson. So the last time we saw Eastern Washington play, Talalu Laimu Jones was kind of their alpha. And Andrew Boston's a guy that had previously been really productive for this team, but he battled injuries. So you've never really seen Roberson in the number 1 receiver role. With that said, Roberson still had a really healthy 33 catches, 470 yards, and he's going to have big games. So you can definitely play Roberson. For UNLV, I mean, this is a team that also is really fast and really pass heavy. They were 40th in the country in pass rate. They were 37th in plays per game. And that's considering they were one of the least efficient offenses in all of college football. So now they get an opponent where they should be able to keep up here. The issue is you have two quarterbacks playing. I think Doug Brumfeld would have been the clear starter, but he was hurt in essentially all of training camp, only returned to practice last week. So Justin Rogers has taken most of the first team snaps, and their coach has been very vocal about playing them both tonight. Complete disaster for this game environment. So I think immediately you probably look to the backfield, where Charles Williams is quietly one of the better bell cows on this team. He rushed for 495 yards on 116 carries. For reference, the listed backup, Charles Magyar, only carried the ball 2 times last year. Charles Williams also a really good receiver out of the backfield. So if you get Eastern Washington leading in this game, Charles Williams isn't game scripted out.
And as you mentioned, I mean, most of the games really had no opportunity for him to, to get ahead or even be competent. He had to rely maybe on padding the stats in catch-up mode. There is a chance. I think I lean Eastern Washington. If I had to bet it, I didn't. There's a very real chance that UNLV is winning and wins this game and is winning throughout this game. So Williams could be in a totally different game script than we saw all of last year, just because of how dysfunctional they are. He seems like a pretty good piece. Anything on the outside? You mentioned the quarterbacks is probably not going to be a stack, but like Kyle Williams, anything there as a mid-range target?
Yeah, Kyle Williams had a 28.5% target share last year, almost 9 targets per game. He's really cheap. I think he would be a secondary play to the players on the other side of the ball in Limu Jones, Roberson, and Boston, but you can play him in these sort of stacks. He's a good run back. Like Charles Williams, a great run back. Kyle Williams, a good run back. And even for the ancillary receivers, you have like Ziel Griffin at 3,900, Steve Jenkins, 4,800. Jenkins has battled a lot of injuries in his career. Griffin only played in 4 games last year, but he still finished second on the team in receiving. They're all options and run backs for stacks. But Kyle Williams is the alpha for this offense.
This has absolutely nothing to do with this slate, but if he was healthy, do you think that Tate Martell would have a chance at the starting job?
No.
No.
Do you?
It's that rough? Your boy, guy's been everywhere. Didn't even know he was on this team until I just saw it. But
like Tate Martell couldn't beat out N'Kosi Perry.
That's not great for all
and
you.
Jaron Williams.
We'll be talking about the U on Saturday. Certainly, you guys should know we got games tomorrow and Saturday. Me and Matt are going to be here each and every day, breaking it down. We'll have videos, articles, projections, everything that you guys need. So make sure to come back tomorrow. But we still have one more game, and then we're going to take some questions. This is even worse than Bowling Green and Tennessee. It's an FCS, FBS, but this is really bad. Southern Utah is a 45-point underdog playing Arizona State. Just for reference to show you how bad it could be, the total is just 55.5. So clearly Southern Utah is not expected to do much. We did see them. I guess that helps a little, but all it confirmed is that they're very, very bad. Correct?
Yeah, they are implied for 5.5 points. This is a team you just X out.
Okay.
And plus they use like a 3-man committee at running back. Their highest receiver had 5 targets. It's a disaster.
The UCF game has been slightly delayed. That's very unfortunate. I really hope that there's not weather that impacts Dylan Gabriel there. I think it'll be fine, though. I'm not. Let me ask you that, because we do have a little time here. Are you worried about the weather in UCF?
I wasn't. I'm going to look at the radar now.
Okay. We just got over. Hope everyone stayed safe. That was insane rain. I'm in New York. Disturbing last night. A lot of rain. While you look at that, I'm going to talk about Arizona State for a little bit. This is a team that I do think in the Pac-12, absolutely live to make some noise. I like everything they're doing. But as we kind of talked about earlier, it's not a question of can they do it. It's are they going to need to do it? And against Southern Utah, it's hard to imagine Jaden Daniels and these big-time players getting the full allotment. So is that the situation, Matt, when we talk about a team like Arizona State? Are they in the bucket with Tennessee where they're playable, but you need to run hot in the first half? Or is this even worse considering it's an FCS opponent and there's just no reasonable way that Arizona State gets enough run to make these guys playable?
They could certainly get enough run. They're going to do it through efficiency if they do. Like, one example you could look to is Arizona State versus Arizona. You remember that game last year? Arizona State won 70-7.
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah. So, I mean,
I
you're
bet
going to
that
see
game.
efficiency like you saw with UCLA last week. So, like, Rashad White had 10 carries for 133 yards and 3 scores. Daniel Nada, their third string running back, had 16 carries for 60 yards and a score. Chip Trayanum was the least efficient, 10 for 41, 1 score. So he still kind of got there based on a touchdown. He's not going to win you a GPP if that's the line you get. But these guys have crazy upside, even in one half of play, based on their opponent. Same thing goes for the receivers. Arizona State is typically a run-heavy team to begin with, which makes me lean away from Jaden Daniels. A great signal caller in better matchups. It's just this team likes to run the ball right away. If they have success on the ground, and that's how they score their first couple touchdowns, does Daniels even get the opportunity to put up that elite score? I would lean no. But even in the game against Arizona, he still threw 2 touchdowns. So it's possible.
I will say, just to speak to kind of why I would err on the side of caution, Arizona's really bad, but that's a rivalry game, and B, that spread was not this. Like they weren't expected to win by 60 points here. I think everybody knows what's going to happen, and I'd be pretty stunned. Daniels is somewhat mobile, kind of like DTR, even though this is much, much worse. I have a feeling that they gear him down. They're not going to give him ample opportunities to be running against Southern Utah. I just don't see that happening.
Like in that game against Arizona, they put their backups in pretty early. Like their backup running backs carried the ball 22 times.
Arizona fumbled legitimately. It felt like it was 10 times. I remember that game well. I don't know why we're even talking about that. I wanted to.
I just am trying to use like a comparison to
bringing up old battle wounds here for me. It's not.
I don't think it's the same game, and I don't think like Rashad White's going to have the same efficiency per se. He may, I don't know, but I just want to say, like, even if they play a half, Rashad White could do another 133 yards on 10 carries, like what Zach Charbonnet did last week, playing an opponent that just can't keep up. 100 yards and 6 carries for Charbonnet. These things happen in college football. We saw it a lot with Clemson in the past. Like ETN would do this, or T. Higgins and Justin Ross. I think these guys need to be in your pool. I don't know if they're necessarily good cash options, price adjusted, but there's huge upside here.
No doubt. I think when you're looking at major spreads like this, it more impacts the stackability than the one-offs. Like somebody is going to have a big game on Arizona State. We just don't know who. The chances that all of them do, it's hard because Southern Utah would have to put up points, and that's just realistically not going to happen.
I agree with you. I think the games where you want, not that you want, where you would consider like a quarterback, wide receiver, and running back sack, the spread needs to be closer than this. And the only games that really meet that today would be the Eastern Washington UNLV and Boise and UCF. And I don't think those are the best environments for that anyway because of timeshares in the backfield.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I think the sneaky game today might be, I want to say the East Carolina. To me, East Carolina App State is the wild card. I don't know what to expect there. East Carolina, as I mentioned, they have the mobile QB that they didn't really use last year. That is one I think in tournaments, I wouldn't mind rolling the dice. But we've got about 5 minutes left. So chat, if you have some questions, drop them. We had one earlier in the show that I want to ask you. It was a 3v3. Rashad White, Cameron Peoples, and Najigba, or Zonovan Knight, Tion Evans, and Garrett Wilson.
The latter.
I would go with the latter as well. I think that Evans is one of the guys in the blowout games that I'm pretty comfortable with because A, he's going to get carries on the ground, and Bowling Green might as well be an FCS team.
I like Heupel's offense a lot, and I like that it's balanced.
Are you, I assume, I've tried to ask you this with every game, but I kind of skipped the last couple. You're not going to bet the Southern Utah-Arizona State game, correct?
No.
Okay.
The only bet I have tonight is Ohio State.
Do you have a take, though? I know you just said you're not betting it. With this Eastern Washington, they were a significant north of a touchdown underdog when the spread opened. They have moved 8 points, maybe a little more, to a slight favorite. Is that an overreaction, do you think? Or is this offense, as you mentioned, that electric and UNLV is that bad?
I think UNLV still gets it done here. Like UNLV, they recruit better than Eastern Washington. It's for sure. Like Eastern Washington doesn't have like some powerhouse transfer from like the FBS or something. Their losses came to Idaho and North Dakota State. Their coach, I think, is good and efficient, but I think there's still a discrepancy in talent. That's really my only take on it. And that's why like I think it's really hard to handicap these really bad like FBS teams versus the really good FCS teams because there's still a huge level of competition difference.
Yeah, I'm like I said, I'm not touching it. I probably would lean Eastern Washington, but
like what's the game? UConn's playing Holy Cross, and they're like a 2.5 point favorite. Like I have no idea what to do with that game.
We got South Dakota and Kansas as well. Some real barn burners this week. Did you check anything interesting from the radar?
It looks like it's gonna stop, but I'm on Google. I'm not there, and I'm not a weatherman.
We're not. We say every podcast we're not doctors. You're also not a weatherman.
Like when I like check the weather, I Google weather in so and so location and see what it is. Unless like someone's reporting it on Twitter, that's what I do.
Sounds about right. All right, couple questions here. Favorite running back on FanDuel not named Ibrahim.
Favorite running back on FanDuel?
Yes.
Does price matter at all?
I would assume not, but we're gonna assume it doesn't.
All right. I think Nate Noel is the best price adjusted play on both platforms for running backs. He's super, super cheap on FanDuel. So if you need a cheap guy, that's where I would go. But if you can afford the expensive backs, I would just play Cameron Peoples if Ibrahim's off the table.
Yeah, Peoples would be where I was going to go. App State favorite. He's going to get the run. Favorite one-off from Arizona State.
It's going to be the backs. I like both Rashad White and Chip Trayanum. We didn't talk the receivers much, but like they are going to rotate like 5 guys out there, which makes them even harder to target in a game where we only think they're going to play a half. If you're going to a receiver, it's Johnny Wilson.
Shakir or White?
Shakir or White? Shakir.
Best wide receiver for cash?
Shakir.
Washington guy?
Oh, yes. Washington guy. The highest projected Shakir, highest like price per dollar guy or point per dollar guy is it's going to be, there's a really close projection between the 2 players on Eastern Washington, Limu Jones and Boston.
Yeah, I'm with you. That Eastern Washington it allows you the permutations to do so much because you're not allocating a ton to the stack. All right, couple more. Rashad White or Cameron Peoples?
Peoples.
Definitely. I'm with you. Worst offense tonight, Bowling Green or USF? It's got to be Bowling Green.
It's Bowling Green. Bowling Green's. You know Bowling Green's quarterback. I'm sure you
McDonald?
do. Yeah.
Yeah, he's not going to be playing on Sundays.
He completed 43.9% of his passes for 1 touchdown and 6 interceptions last year. In MAC play, they played a MAC only schedule.
You know what? I'll give you a little trivia question. There's another quarterback last year who I believe had 1 passing touchdown and 6 picks. You know who it is? The Rice quarterback, Luke McCaffrey, who we will be betting against on Saturday. Holani or Tion Evans?
Holani or Tion Evans? Give me Tion Evans.
Yeah, Tennessee, I think. All right, final question here. Great way to go out. Best long shot to win on the money line if you had to take one.
Wow, best long shot on the money line. Boise. Are they a long shot? Can I count them?
Yeah, that counts. It's anyone besides can't take UNLV. I'm going to say East Carolina because A, I don't believe in Bryce, and B, I think that when you have a mobile quarterback like that, you never know. I also already bet UCF and Ohio State, so I'm not going to say those other teams because that wouldn't make any sense. But you know what? We've done some good work here. I believe the slate got 20 seconds, so I could squeeze in one more. Final question from Timothy Lee. Using Gabriel for cash, or would you go with CJ Stroud?
I would play Gabriel in cash.
I think that's the move as well. UCF, great team total. This has been some really solid work. Great slate tonight, 7 games. Me and Matt will be back tomorrow breaking down everything for the Friday batch of games, a lot of new teams. And once again, I just want to give a quick shout out to Prize Picks, doing some great work over there. Make sure you go. Matt's got you covered with videos each and every day there. We're going to be doing a special live after lock show with them tomorrow, so stay tuned for that as well. Good luck tonight, guys. Sign up, use that promo code tailgate, and we will talk to you all tomorrow on Awesemo.com's live before lock. Bye.